So welcome to our Advocacy 101. My name is Donna Fishman. I am on the board of directors for National Council of Jewish Women, Chicago North Shore. And the reason we're doing this event is several weeks ago or a couple months ago, Jessica pulled a group of her friends together, younger women, and then we were starting our Lift leadership program. I can't remember what it stands for, but it's a leadership program for younger women. And so we all met and just got to know each other. And I talked a little bit about background of NCJW, and we talked a lot, of course, about advocacy. And some of the people said, I'd really love like a background on advocacy. And so we said, well, let's do an Advocacy 101, and that's what tonight is. And I'm happy to be joined by, I will introduce Beverly in a minute, but our two co-presenters with me will be Jill Lexier and Jan Schwartz. They are our co-state policy advocacy chairs for the National Council of Jewish Women. So they actually work on the state level, volunteer work on state level on a lot of our legislative issues. And Beverly Copeland, who is in the middle of my screen, she is our local section advocacy person. So Beverly's really going to be mostly on mute, and she's the idea is that you younger people, you're participating. And so we're really, really happy to have you all, and would love to get to know you all a little bit better. We do have a lot of content, and we're going to try to get through it all in an hour because I know it's late. And so we want to make sure to get through everything. So I just would love for you to all to introduce yourself and just say very quickly kind of what brought you here tonight. So go ahead, Chelsea, why don't you start?
Oh my gosh, way to put me on the spot. Okay. A couple of reasons. Well, first of all, I'm Chelsea Laliberte Barnes. Doesn't sound Jewish from the name, but my mother is. And so we were raised Jewish in Buffalo Grove, and I grew up in Buffalo Grove, went to Stevenson High School, and became a social worker. My brother died from an overdose 13 years ago, and we launched one of the largest foundations in the state that provides services for people who use drugs and people who love them or have lost someone. So that's been the bulk of my work over the last, decade plus. And now I'm a mom with my own child and my own family living in Palatine. And, a couple of people who I work with in the field suggested, you might want to reach out to the National Council on Jewish Women. It feels sort of isolating doing this as a Jewish woman, and just as it kind of does a lot anyways. But so I'm just really curious. I've been doing policy work for years on the mental health and healthcare access and criminal justice reform front. And I'm really curious about how your agency is approaching advocacy, and just wanted to learn more about how I can help support our people. So that's
wow.
it.
Fabulous. Thank you. And Hannah?
Hi, I'm Hannah Bloom Hirschberg, she, hers. I am here because a former rabbi of ours posted about Repro Shabbat, whenever that was, because time has still lost all meaning. I think it was a few weeks ago. And I read it and I was like, yeah, this is the place for me. So had a great conversation with Donna and heard about this evening here. I've done some policy work in the past, but it's been a long time. So I'm excited to get back into it.
Great, thanks so much. And Jessica?
Hi, well, I'm a little bit background. I'm from Michigan, since Chelsea was sharing where she grew up. And so I don't have like a natural community here in Illinois. So I'm just making it as I go along. I've been living here about 15 years. We were in the city for 12 of those years. And so I just reached out to Donna through a friend a few months ago and was like, I want to know more about the section in Illinois. A lot of my mom's friends are involved in the Michigan section. And so we just had a really nice conversation, and it's just kind of snowballing from there. And I haven't done any advocacy work yet, but it's something that I'm interested in doing in the future. And I just feel like coming out on this side of the pandemic, I just want to give back to our community and help people and be like, continue educating myself and learning and growing.
And why don't you tell everyone that you work for NCJW
Oh, and now,
also?
now I'm working. So I just started a few weeks ago as the communications and membership coordinator. So I'm working part-time for NCJW now.
And we are so happy to have
Yeah.
you. So
And I recognize Hannah from another like learning thing that we're in through JUF, actually, through PJ Library. So I'm Mara. She's friends with Mara.
I was like, I know your name. I'm
So I
sorry.
just saw her like last week on another Zoom, but with other people. So
And I'll
okay.
see you next week. So-
yes, exactly.
Well, there you go. Good. Nice connection. Okay. Well, I'm just going to share my screen and go to. Okay. So just a quick overview of the agenda. We just did our introductions. We're going to go through kind of a definition of advocacy, how a bill becomes law, why your vote counts, how to make your story count, and then NCJW advocacy. So we have great presentations and there's a lot of conversation built in. So I hope everyone will stay off mute and please participate. So I love this definition of advocacy. Advocacy is an important method of changing the world for a better tomorrow. Anyone can be an advocate. And I'm just curious for all of you, how do you define advocacy? What does advocating mean to you?
I think helping others that can't necessarily speak up for themselves or help themselves or know how to help themselves.
Yeah, so being a voice.
Mm-hmm.
And that I think that's a great definition. And that's what we do when we are in Springfield or we're in Washington. We are the voice of people who need help, of all women, children, and families. Anybody else? All right. So the next thing I want to talk about when we talk about advocacy, what we are doing is trying to make change. And change happens in a lot of different ways. So there are a lot of different decision makers. So I wanted to throw out for discussion, when you think about decision makers that we might advocate to, who are decision makers that you think of? Obviously, we know like the state legislature. So just curious, who else do you think are decision makers? And this could be on the local, state, or federal level.
I mean, I think there are some pretty powerful lobbying organizations that I tend to think of. I guess I think of that more on like a federal level.
Absolutely. So the next question, of course, is who influences decision makers, and lobbyists are the number one. Like they're the ones influencing the decision makers. Yeah. So who else?
Communities and organizations of activists.
Right. So grassroots activists, and that's at NCJW, we consider ourselves grassroots activists. Any other groups? I remember we had a meeting when we did the Taste of NCJW, Jessica, and you couldn't come because you went to a school board meeting.
Yes.
So
School
boards
yeah.
have a lot of power over our children. So that's another one. Anyone else you think of?
I mean, I wish I thought data scientists influenced. Should? Does that count here? They should. Scientists should.
Yes. And
I'm not sure I feel they do.
Well, it depends on who the decision maker is. But when you think about who's testifying, often people are bringing in scientists so that they are a group that experts, there's experts all the time. So, think about it. I think about it from kind of the ground up. So our village boards and city, Chicago City Council, all the village or town boards, they make decisions over a lot of things. Even the library board, right? Which books get banned. So there are a lot of local decisions. And then of course, at the state level, our state legislators. And then there are election boards. So, I mean, it goes on and on. Judges, and you can't lobby judges, of course, but judges make a lot of decisions that impact our lives. As you know, Roe versus Wade was a judicial decision, of course. All the branches of government. But just to think about, there's so many people who are out there making decisions. I mean, there's the Water Reclamation Board. There is, you know, the county board. I think most of us except Jill live in Cook County. She's in DuPage. So the county boards can make important decisions. In terms of health, the health departments, the public health departments all have their own board and they make decisions. So there are so many different ways that we can advocate because there's so many different decision makers. So I just wanted to talk about that real quick. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but how do bills become laws? And this is, you know, kind of an important part of Advocacy 101 because there's different ways that we can intervene. So on a very, very surface level, a bill gets introduced and it gets introduced in that House or Senate, and it's different in Illinois and the federal government. So I'm really talking more about Illinois. Goes through committee, has to get approved in both the House and Senate, and then it goes to the governor. And the governor passes it or vetoes it. If he vetoes it, then it has to get re-voted on. So that's a very simple version. This is the more complicated version, and I will be happy, and I really should. I'll send you all the slides so that you can see them, and you can read this more carefully. But a couple of things I just want to point out. I'm certainly not going to read all this. So a bill is drafted, it gets introduced by a sponsor into the House or into the Senate or into both. And this is the first place where there can be advocacy. So you can say, Chelsea talked about criminal justice. So I want to do criminal justice reform. So for one example more recently was cash bail. So they eradicated, Rachel, they eradicated cash bail in Illinois. So that means if you're arrested, you can't be kept because you don't have the cash to get out of bail to post bond. So somebody cared about that issue enough and found a sponsor. So a sponsor is of course a member of either the House or the Senate. And that's the first place you go, you tell your story, which we're going to hear about. And so that's the first place we can advocate. Then the bill is read, the bill gets assigned to committees. And so that's another whole process. And it's when they're in committees that we do witness slips. So some of you might already be on our list if you're not, to be our witness slip warriors. Then the bill is heard in and out of the committee. And you can see there's 3 different things about committees. So one thing I wanted to point out is we work in partnership, and Jill and probably Jen will talk about this. Like, we don't have to know all these details because the people who lead the work will say, this is when we need, it's in this committee, these are the members of the committee, and please NCJW, get this out to your members. And if you have someone in their district, have them call. So there are always people to help us. Like, you don't have to memorize this, but it is a complicated process. And we are all, I think, always still learning. So the bill gets to committee and then it gets heard back on the floor. And then the bill gets voted on. And then if it's in one chamber, it has the whole process in the second chamber. And this session is very quick. They have an abbreviated session this year. Usually it's 4 months. And I think it's only 3 this year. So then the governor has 30 days to be sent to the governor. The bill, has 30 days. Then the governor signs it. And then there's all these things on the bottom here. You can see that will happen. That can happen. What the government, if the governor signs it or doesn't sign it, and then what happens with veto. And then hopefully these are good laws and then they become law. So that was a very quick overview. Does anyone have questions just about that process and anything you've seen and want to know, like, well, where in the process something happened?
So can I ask a question that's not necessarily for Illinois, but like general question?
Yes.
So like this bill, the gay bill that's going on like in Florida right now, for example, like at which point in the process are we at? Or is that state at, I should say? Like, why is it now? Why is it all of a sudden?
They passed it, Jessica. That's done. The Supreme Court could knock it out as being unconstitutional, but they won't.
Oh, okay.
So what happens is someone has to bring it to the Supreme Court. Somebody like the ACLU, for instance, this is their slide. The ACLU would have to say, we're going to take this bill. We think it's unconstitutional. And they would take it through the courts. It doesn't go straight to the Supreme Court.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. But this Supreme Court probably would not defend it.
But they might not take the case. They don't have to take the case.
Right. They would not have a problem with this.
And that is a lot of power in the Supreme Court, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's obviously the highest court. That's a great question. I'm in Florida right now, actually, so I'm a little
Oh,
embarrassed that I'm putting money into their economy because I'm so mad. Any other
Can I just
questions?
say one
Go to
thing?
Disney World.
Yes, go ahead, Chelsea.
I just wanted to say, this election year in Illinois is actually significant because we have 2 open Illinois Supreme Court seats, which
Mm.
means that if we don't fill those seats with people who reflect maybe the values of this organization and would protect, the rights of and equity of LGBTQ folks and families and education, that's not going to be a good thing. So, so this election year again is like really interesting in particular, and we have 2 sets of people running in the primary, and it's going to be a real showdown.
Chelsea, what you're saying is so important, and not only do elections have consequences with judges, which is huge, but every single one of our state legislators is running for office again in the primaries. So this midterm is huge, and for judges and for all of our legislators, and maintaining the blues, I can't say that.
You can't say that.
Leaders that we want who will protect us is at risk.
Right.
Right.
So this is
Right.
great timing because this is, just for us to understand what this process is, because there is so much at risk in this next election,
Right.
which is pretty scary. Okay. So now we're going to turn to Jan.
Okay.
So I
Well,
made you
I'm
a
gonna
little cover slide. Go ahead. Just tell me when you're ready for the next
That's
slide.
very cute. I would like to, however, get off a share so I can see everybody, because we're going to start out
Oh,
with a
sure.
discussion.
Sure.
And I would love to see all your faces. And this part I'm talking about is your voice does count. So what I want to ask is, how many of you have stood up for a friend or someone you know? You can raise hands. Great. That is great. How many of you have been an upstander when you witnessed a wrong being done?
I hope so.
Well, raise your hand if you think you have. Well, and I think, Chelsea, from what you said, you have. Do you think you have, Hannah, stood up for people when you've stood? So raise your hand, be proud of that, because that's what advocacy is. When we stand up for people, when we witness things instead of just watching. There's an old study that I remember from graduate school that people in Boston were watching a woman being beat up by a man. And afterwards they asked the onlookers why no one intervened. And they said, because we thought it was her husband. And right, this was in the 60s. And so we want to look at being an upstander, standing up for people, having a voice. So my next question is, and please, I want it to be a discussion. How many of you have advocated for an issue? From what I understand, I think you all have. So I want to hear about it. Jessica, Hannah, Chelsea, you can unmute Hannah. So tell me about that.
I participated in the Women's March a couple years ago. I think it was 2019, probably.
Yeah, I think that's when the last one was. How about you, Hannah?
Well, that brings Jessica's mention of the Women's March brings back memories that I think probably my first advocacy was I went on the March for Women's Lives, which was probably back in 2004, maybe, which was excellent. And then in Illinois, I'm also not from Illinois. I'm originally from New Jersey, but since we moved here, I spent some time working for Voices for Illinois Children. So learned sort of how their lobbyists work and sort of supporting some of the work that those folks were doing down in Springfield.
How about you? That's amazing, both of you. I mean, really, that's great. Chelsea.
I really don't want to take up a lot of time, but I've organized rallies. I helped organize this past after the Texas law went into effect about abortion, I helped organize the women's reproductive rights rally in my local community. I have marched with Black Lives Matter. I picketed outside of Purdue Pharma
Oh, good for you.
for killing people, basically. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm not afraid to go out there.
So what this
Great.
program is really about is sharing our advocacy experiences, because this is not Advocacy 101. You guys know a lot more than you think, and that is wonderful. I want to say, what happened after you advocated? Let's talk about that. Did it make a difference? Hannah, Chelsea, Jessica.
I would
let's
say
talk.
if you're you have to have a long-term plan, right? If you're going to make a big difference. Going to a Black Lives Matter rally, it created awareness in a small community outside of Chicago. But beyond that, no steps were taken to address necessarily locally that I could see diversity, equity, and inclusivity, except for in the community I did it in. They created a diversity officer at the high school, which was great. They made a commitment to diversifying the police force, to diversifying the local social workers. And we have a big movement here up in Lake County around just reforming the criminal justice system and making sure Black and brown folks and women are no longer just meant for jail. So
excuse me, it did make a difference. Chelsea, it did make a difference.
It did, now that I think about it.
It made a
sure.
difference. That small steps, it's like change never happens overnight, but it made a difference. How about you, Jessica and Hannah? Did the work you did you think it made a difference?
I mean, I know it made a difference to me. Like, I felt like you have that camaraderie being with people that are feeling the same way as you are. And so I think it kind of gives you the momentum that you want to do more. And so, you can't always change everyone, but at least you can change yourself a little bit. So
I think what you just said was extremely important. I love that, because that's huge, huge. How about you, Hannah?
I guess so. I mean, I think that, in part, I agree with what, Jessica was saying. And in part, there's, I think it's both the change that things like that brings to each of us. And I think it also sort of reinvigorates us for continuing the work. I mean, all of these things we're talking about are multi-generational efforts, right? Abortion access, reproductive justice, racial justice. These are things that have been issues for a very long time and will continue to be issues, right? They're not going to be solved in our lifetime. And so part of what work like that does is keeps our energy up to continue the fight. And it's that sustains us and keeps us going.
Anna, what you said was just key, that speaking up matters. Even when you don't have the support you want, speaking up is always a starting point to being heard eventually, and action will follow. And the action that you said, Jessica, that starts inside, is the most powerful piece of action. And Chelsea, even though you didn't see all the change you wanted to see, you showed me that a lot of things were heard, and it was a beginning, and other people are taking up the fight with you. So you guys, you get it. So I want to know, and Donna helped with this already, who are the decision-making bodies? Do you want us to just brainstorm that? Just speak out. You don't have to raise your hand or anything.
I would say, I'm sorry, I think I stole that from you.
Well, let's just sort of reiterate it.
Okay, sorry.
Everyone just sort of shout out the different decision-making bodies.
Local board.
Good one.
School boards,
Good one.
Judges, experts in the field.
You got it. And we
Yeah.
go to state agencies, state legislators, federal agencies, Congress, and executive branch. You guys got it. So you don't have to be in Washington, D.C., as you all have experienced, to make a difference. Right now, the most grassroots level, and it's been said already, is the school board elections have become a significant place for local policy. It is school boards that make challenging decisions over masks and vaccine mandates, determine whether to ban books or limit curriculum. School boards can ignore or define policies to intervene with bullying over race, sexual orientation, and gender. Showing up, which all three of you do, really do, makes a difference. Because voting on who is in power makes a difference. And as Chelsea said, all elections have consequences. So to me, we're doing a training, but what I think we're really underlying is that you already have it. And that's really important, because when Chelsea said, I did this stuff, but I don't know if it mattered, it's realizing that it does matter, which is what this is all about. NCJW has had significant experience in working in coalition with other organizations to advocate for policy with our legislature. In the past legislative cycle, for instance, we were able to expand and streamline voting rights. Promote the Vote Illinois is a coalition that NCJW began with when the pandemic hit 2 years ago. Vote by mail at that point was our key issue. At first, we met with legislators to understand the new temporary laws so we could have salons and town halls to educate others. We quickly grew to 30 organizations and shared posts on social media and informational emails. Together, we created, printed, and distributed 120,000 cards that went to disenfranchised voters who did not have the internet. And we used different partners, like at food distribution centers and in health clinics, to deliver that, because we couldn't go door to door because of the pandemic. After the election, we actually met with legislators writing permanent voting bills to make sure the points that we thought were crucial were included in the permanent voting regulations. And we also reached out to all members of each organization in the coalition that spread throughout the state to reach out to their legislators in order to pass these bills, and the entire bill passed. Another example of the power of a shared voice happened during the veto session last fall. We organized rallies through our Reproductive Health Access Coalition, and again, reached out to our members to urge our legislators to end the Parental Notification Act in regard to abortion, and it passed. So the next section we're talking about is how to make your voice count. And I think you kind of know it, but we're gonna just underline a few things. So let's walk through ways to make your voice count. First of all, what issues are of critical importance to you? And I want to hear from all three of you. Jessica?
So many. I think like racial equity is really important to me personally, and everything going on with anti-Semitism in our community. And then I think just I'm not sure if it's going to be an issue in Illinois or not, but like the LGBTQ kids, affecting kids' lives, and anything that has to do with like kids' safety and the bullying and that sort of thing for me.
I love it. How about you, Hannah?
Yeah, I would say racial justice, racial equity, expanding to sort of all forms of hate, be it anti-Asian hate, anti-Semitism, anti-LGBTQ, so, hate crimes bills, I guess, that area. Reproductive justice for me is increasingly important, I think, because I feel it's increasingly under attack, right? Like I used to be less worried about it because I felt more confident. I think that's sort of climate change.
I love it. You guys really are speaking to my heart. Chelsea, I want to hear from you.
I mean, all of those things are really important to me, but I think one of the biggest things we need at the moment is a stronger and more robust mental health workforce. We don't have nearly enough clinicians or facilities that are, tending to the needs of people who have been traumatized, children who are dealing with trauma and anxiety and mood issues, addiction. I mean, being a social worker, it's dire, and we can't hire enough therapists right now. So all of those things, plus making sure that we can increase access to mental health care. We need so much right now. And I think the other thing too is schools. I mean, making sure that schools have everything that they need right now, and they just don't. They weren't set up to deal with a pandemic in this way, and they weren't set up to be for the way that a lot of community members are treating school board members, teachers, and administrators. They are really struggling, and they need a lot of support, and including staffing. We, again, like the job issue in the economy is a huge problem right now. And without fixing those issues or finding a way to solve those issues, I just think we'll continue to see more people struggling with all of the things that were just discussed. So, yeah.
Well, I am so impressed by your passion and so thrilled to hear from all of you about this. I don't even know how many of you are members of NCJW. We would love to have you. And I don't even know if this is an ad, but I love everything you're saying and your passion. So I'm going to go a step further with your passions, how to make your vote count, how to make your voice count. And these may be things that you already know, but how to take the issues you're saying, and we work a lot in coalitions to make things happen. I'm going to use an example with P&A. Are you all aware of a Parental Notification Act that teens could not have an abortion without parental permission? And we worked really hard in our Reproductive Health Access Coalition to get that thrown out. So I'm going to use that as an example. The first thing is, when you're advocating, is the importance of telling your story. So how advocates were able to change the course of P&A and put an end to it is teens gave testimony to legislators on why parental notification stood in the way of getting an abortion and interfered with their rights. They shed light on the reality of conflict of interest with parents, as the teens may have been victims of incest or violent abuse. And from that, the coalition was able to put together a statement that parent involvement laws cannot conjure love and support for pregnant teens where there's violence in the home. What they do is reduce access of abortion and increase the likelihood of more complicated later term abortions. Then you go to step 2, which is you back up this statement and the stories with facts and figures about why there's a need for change and the benefit that change will bring. So in repealing P&A, data was given to the legislators that dealt with number of calls that went to the hotline on this issue. For example, the hotline provided a way that a teen could go to a judge in order to get permission to have an abortion without parental consent. However, this was a complex process to get permission to bypass the P&A. And this is still going on actually until June, when it will finally come to an end. But going through this process not only added to the trauma of being pregnant as a teen, and very likely through abusive circumstances to begin with. It impacted the wait for an abortion, making it medically more complicated and increased stress of dealing with non-supportive environment when support is paramount. This was substantiated by medical and mental health providers. This data made the liability of P&A to pregnant teens clear to legislators, and change was possible. The third point, and I think you all know this without me saying it, is to use the shared voice, and all three of you do, with individuals and organizations. P&A would not have been repealed without working together in a coalition. In this case, the Reproductive Health Access Coalition. So with all that, I am going to hand it over to Jill, who actually will talk about all the advocacy work that we do in NCJW. And I just really thank you for sharing all that you do. You guys are amazing.
Thank you, Jan.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, thank you. Great. I am going to talk very specifically about NCJW, a little bit about the issues we work on both at the national and state level. Please, if I use any term you don't know, or you want, or you have any questions, don't feel free to kind of interrupt me midstream. Okay, otherwise I'm just going to go on and on really quickly to make sure I can impart as much information as I can. So as Donna introduced us, I am a state policy advocacy co-chair along with Jan, and we coordinate all our advocacy here in the state of Illinois. We liaise with our national office and then with our 2 active sections, so I'll reference sections. And then we also are a network, we are also in network with our counterparts in other states so that we can learn from each other. And I have to tell you, I really love this job. Donna had this job before me, but I really do love this job. I really love advocating with NCJW. And as some of you mentioned, I also didn't grow up here in Illinois. I actually grew up in Canada and have lived in a number of different cities and 3 countries and a couple continents. And when I moved to Illinois, I got involved with NCJW, and I really felt at home. I really felt I found my people. And Chelsea, I live out in Naperville. It's also not a very Jewish area. So it was really comforting when I found NCJW and found other like-minded women there. And I've continued to engage, and I've really found myself with NCJW. I'm going to tell you why I love advocating with NCJW, what issues we're engaged in, and how you can get involved. So first, the why. You know, it's a bit like the Passover 4 questions. Why is NCJW different than other organizations? The first reason, next slide, Donna. Thanks. The first reason is, you can advance, is that we're good at it. It's our legacy. I'm not sure if you actually know the history of NCJW. It started in 1893 when they had the World's Fair here in Chicago. And there was a group of, there was sort of a World Parliament of Religions convened, and Jewish men were invited to participate, and they looked to their women folk and said, oh, why don't you ladies come along and serve the coffee? And Hannah G. Solomon and some of her colleagues said, well, heck no, we're going to have our own women's religious forum. And NCJW grew from there. And as Hannah said, it's sort of become a multi-generational endeavor. Ever since we began in 1893, NCJW has been advocating for immigrant rights, for better living conditions, for birth control, and in support of families. And we've done this for years and years and years. We have our own NCJW office in Washington, where we actually have paid advocates and lobbyists. We're very greatly respected in Washington, and we've had excellent relations with almost every president. So number 2 reason, number 2 only, thank you, is that we are nonpartisan. One of the reasons why I think we're so well respected in our advocacy is because we stick to the issues and not get involved in campaigns. Sorry, Chelsea. We're a 501c3 organization, and therefore we have to stay strictly nonpartisan. And I'll talk about this a little bit more later on. But you know, some people might feel encumbered by that because, especially in a year like this year, an election year, we can't get involved in campaigns. But I really do believe, for the long game, that by focusing solely on policy rather than on people has made us very credible and successful over the years. Next, Donna. The third reason for me is that we're Jewish. However, unlike some other Jewish organizations who focus solely on assisting the Jewish community, NCJW has always been dedicated to improving the lives of women, children, and families in the communities and in the countries in which we live. You know, I'm proud to do this work as a Jewish person, especially today in today's environment where There are some very vocal religious voices that have dominated the moral and faith-based conversation. I mean, it's becoming increasingly important that we speak out as people of faith. This is really important as we advocate for reproductive health rights and justice. And fourth for me is that we are a multi-issue organization. As I mentioned, historically, we've advocated on a number of different issues and continue to do so to this day. You know, I think it gives us a broader perspective. It helps us create those great networks and coalitions with a diversity of people and organizations, and allows us to take an intersectional approach to our issues and our advocacy. So let's dive in. What are those issues that we are working on? Next slide. Thank you. No, back up. Thank you. As I mentioned, we are multi-issue, but we do like to focus our attention on a few core issues at a time. And we take our lead to some extent from our national organization. So this is national NCJW current issues. There are 4. One is expanding abortion access. I think we can all agree that is really under, while we are in fairly good shape here in Illinois, we know they're all at risk. In other states, as Hannah said, we didn't used to have to worry about it as much. We certainly do now. And so NCJW is committed to creating a world where all people have the right to build their families and live their lives with dignity. And again, it's our Jewish experience that tells us that reproductive freedoms are integrally bound to our religious liberty. And we're committed to advancing the goals of reproductive justice so that every person can make their own moral and faith-informed decisions about their body, health, and family. So at the national level, we were hoping that harmful state bans could be preempted through federal legislation. The Women's Health Protection Act would have created a new tool for safeguarding access to high quality care and securing constitutional rights by protecting patients and providers from dangerous political interference. The idea was we'd be able to preempt some of these state abortion bans. The bill passed the House in a historic vote on September 24th, was taken up on the Senate on February 28th, but disappointingly failed to pass. On the national level, we have a hopeful note. As of December 2021, the US Food and Drug Administration, which was part of the administration's purview, announced the removal of restrictions on mifepristone. So we removed roadblocks to accessing medication abortion for many patients in the United States. Again, on the national level, National NCJW launched its 73 Forward campaign recently to elevate and empower the Jewish faith voice in the conversation about abortion access. And it was through that that we had Repro Shabbat, Hannah. Some 900 organizations participated in that across the nation with over 100 events. And we had 6 events here in Illinois. The next national issue is protecting and promoting the vote. As we've talked already, our vote is our voice. And throughout its history, NCJW has worked to expand voter rights and drive voter turnout and educate on issues and engage advocates. Disappointingly, both the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, very critical bills, were blocked in the Senate. But at the national level, in preparation for the midterm elections, Vote Forward and National Council of Jewish Women are working together to increase participation, civic participation, by sending letters to voters right from your own homes. So you'll watch for that. Vote Forward letters have been proven to boost voter turnout by as much as 3.4 percentage points, which apparently is very huge in pollster language. So both sections will be participating in that national campaign. The third is ensuring courts matter. We've talked a little bit already about courts and how important they are. I think the last few years has definitely made us all realize how federal court decisions impact every aspect of our lives, the schools we can attend, our privacy, our ability to start a family when we choose, the safety of the products we buy, our religious freedom, our voting rights. And that's why we work to ensure a fair, independent, and qualified judiciary that reflects the rich diversity of our communities. That is absolutely essential. So NCJW is excited to support the nomination of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson to the Supreme Court. She would fill the vacancy left by Justice Stephen Breyer, who will be stepping down at the end of the term. And she's already made history as the first Black woman nominated to the US Supreme Court. I will say as an aside, federal judges are appointed, but at the state level, we have judges here who are elected. So when Chelsea was talking about how important it was to elect judges that share our progressive values, those would be state judges, but all federal judges are appointed, not just Supreme Court ones, right? So I wanted to make that distinction. And then finally at the national level is work that we do in Israel, less obviously so, but in Israel, NCJW does its work through a very much a gender lens, empowering Israeli women to advocate for a robust civil society. We provide a lot of grants, participation in advocacy coalitions, and we support women and in Israel and their fight for gender rights in Israel. So we're going to move now to state issues. Does anybody have any questions on the national front before I move on? Okay, let's look at the state issues. Thank you very much, Donna. We're on the right slide. So here at the state level, we're focused on, also we'll try to focus on about 4 core issues. As I mentioned, we take our lead from national, but we are a grassroots organization. So at the section level, at the state level, we do have some autonomy to choose issues at our state level that we think are important, as long as they are within those policy boundaries and further our mission. And here in Illinois, we decide on our state issues by gauging interest from members, and we survey the leadership, the 2 boards of our sections periodically to make sure that we're on the right track and working on the right things. So you can see on the left-hand side, we've got 2 issues, reproductive health rights and justice and voting rights. And those again are in line with the national issues. And then on the right-hand side are 2 issues that we've chosen here in Illinois within the last couple of years. And that is something very near and dear to Beverly's heart, is gun violence prevention. And then racial justice. And so many of you also mentioned how racial justice is increasingly important. Now, I will mention that racial justice isn't really an issue on its own. It's sort of more of an intersection, more of a lens. And we'll talk about how that plays out. And actually you can advance that slide, not the slide, but just advance slightly there, Donna, thank you. So that shows sort of the intersectionality, and many of these issues have offshoots. So we also become engaged in sort of gender-based violence and menstrual equity and immigration rights, judicial nominations, housing access, and so on. Okay. So now I'm going to go into each state issue and certainly ask any questions or stop me if I say anything that ask any questions. So the first one is reproductive health rights and justice. As Jen already gave in her example, we work very closely with the Reproductive Health Access Coalition. The partners in there are ACLU of Illinois, Planned Parenthood of Illinois, Chicago Abortion Fund, and these organizations have paid lobbyists. I should have said right off the get-go that NCJW here at the state level does not have any paid lobbyists. It's us. So we do rely on our partners in these coalitions to alert us to when we need to sort of activate on legislation. And Jan had already mentioned that we're very proud of the work we did to repeal the Parental Notice of Abortion Act, so I won't belabor that one. What we're working on in this legislative session is not just the idea of reproductive rights. You know, you can have rights to abortion, but if a clinic is too far away, if it's too expensive, then you don't have access to it. So we're focusing a lot more now on access. And we're also, one of the offshoots we're working on is menstrual equity. We have a number of bills actually in the current legislative session that are looking at the availability of menstrual products in prisons and schools and in parks. And I'm pleased to let you know that the menstrual hygiene products for people in prison has already passed out of the Illinois House, and it's moving to the Senate. So that's really good news for this year. Another interesting bill that looks promising is a slight amendment to the Tax Act, the Illinois Tax Act, so that when people make donations of menstrual products and diapers, or even money to go towards menstrual products or diapers, the contributors' contribution will be entitled to an income tax credit. So there's going to be some encouragement there. I do want to point out an interesting bill that we're tracking, because this is one that's very nuanced and one that we are currently opposing. And that is, interestingly enough, the ban on marriage under 18. As Jen mentioned, one of our themes when we were advocating for repeal of parental notification was that we can trust young people to make decisions on their own. There is a bill being put forward that would ban all marriage under 18 with absolutely no exceptions. And the idea is to protect, obviously to protect people from a coercive or abusive relationship. But we do not believe that banning marriages without exception and taking away agency from young people is the approach. So watch that space. It's quite interesting conversation going on. Voting rights, as Jen had already discussed, the Promote the Vote Coalition has been a fantastic vehicle here in Illinois, where we continue to make our voices heard on the importance of voting rights. And Jen is far too modest. She actually created this coalition that has over 30 members now. So, and the bills that we're working on there at the moment is voting in prison, which would provide a person convicted of a felony or otherwise under sentence in a correctional institute to have their right to vote restored. And both of our sections are supporting that. And Jan's Promote the Vote Coalition has a subgroup that's actually working with organizations to sort of re-engage our discouraged voters. And we're working with a lot of diverse organizations. There are a lot of people of color and who have really discouraged in this current environment. And we hope to re-engage them in time for the midterm elections. Let's move on to something we haven't talked about yet, which is gun violence prevention. Beverly Copeland got us going on this. She's the expert in this field. We work there with the Illinois Handgun Violence Prevention Coalition. They just renamed themselves as One Aim. We're not that excited about that title, but and there's a few things going on with gun violence prevention. Some of them have a kind of a technical aspect, which is interesting. One is called micro stamping. One of these bills is to fund and incentivize gun manufacturers to micro stamp their products. So this would have the firearm cartridge casings would actually be linked to the gun that fired them, so that it would help the police to solve a gun crime, because you no longer need to find the gun if you have the casing. So that's an interesting one. And then another one that's technically related is the idea of regulating ghost guns. So now with 3D printers, people are actually making their own guns, and they are very difficult to regulate. So that's the idea of being able to regulate those ghost guns. Another way that that guns get into Illinois in particular is when other people who have legally bought a gun lose or have their guns stolen, and then they get into others' hands, and then there's a whole other market for those guns. So this is an interesting law that would actually make an offense for a person who loses or has their gun stolen if they don't report it right away. So that's an interesting aspect. And then finally, on gun violence, we're working on something that seems so simple. I can't believe anyone would be against this, is a program to just educate people about gun storage and safe gun storage. It has moved the House, past the Illinois House, and moves to the Senate, and that's a good thing, because Firearms, someone talked about children. Firearms are the #1 leading cause of death among children and teens in Illinois. And here's our intersection with racial justice. Black children and teens in Illinois are 13 times more likely than their white peers to die by guns. It's just shocking. I will talk a little bit about racial equity. Again, Jan started a coalition called Building Equity, working with Rainbow Push and NCJW and some other organizations to sort of further our community organizing. As Chelsea mentioned, this is sort of the long view of building relationships with some of our community members. So far, we've already collaborated on some educational programs on voting, on criminal justice reform, and now our focus lately has been on homelessness and housing access. Legislatively, there are 2 bills going forward in this current session. One is homeless prevention, which would prevent undue administrative burden on the application process for people who are applying for assistance. And the other is the Keep Illinois Home Act, which provides additional protection for tenants. And as I mentioned, we just had a fantastic, Jan led this fantastic town hall that we had last week. We had 32 co-sponsors and over 1,000 viewers. This town hall educated everybody about the challenges faced by those looking for access to affordable housing, racial discrimination, building housing permanence, the impact of homelessness, and then some information about some new laws that strengthen and enforce tenants' rights. As Jan also mentioned, we find our best success working with other coalitions, other organizations in coalition. We can't find a coalition, we create one. Jan created 2 already in the last couple of years. So next slide, please, Donna. Oops, wrong. Oh, darn, I thought I rearranged that. Keep going. I might ask you to go back. Keep going. There we go. But I might ask you to come back to that other one. So just briefly, how do we put advocacy into action at NCJW? I should have sort of said this was our 5th differentiator, as it were. At NCJW, we believe that advocacy is best supported by education and community service. We sort of have this 3-pronged approach. Not all advocacy and policy organizations have this totality of approach. So we educate ourselves and our community so that we are informed advocators. And I want to say that during COVID, we actually pivoted our education program to Zoom very, very successfully. And we have had all throughout COVID, monthly education topics. And we're able to attract attendees and speakers from all across the country. It's called Spotlight, and this series has covered such varied topics as climate change. Chelsea, you said you're interested in that. Hannah said she was interested in that. Gender-based violence, police accountability, Indigenous people's rights, Jewish and Muslim relations, Black maternal health, propaganda and misinformation, anti-Semitism. Jessica, you were interested in that. Transgender rights. Jessica, I think you mentioned that one too. There's an interesting one coming up about people with disabilities, fair maps, cost of segregation. We've really done a terrific job. And then we also pair advocacy with community service. Donna Fishman is our chair of community service at the moment. So we don't just advocate, we sort of put our money and our time and our energy where our mouth is. We support women who are homeless, survivors of domestic gender-based violence, and we support a soup kitchen. So next slide there, Donna. Oops. Yes, good. Okay, I want to take just a few minutes to talk about this 501c3 stuff and how we kind of balance our 501c3, balance compliance and engagement. So maybe you know this, I'm not sure, I'll just have a quick repeat, but 501c3 references a tax exempt status as defined by the IRS. So nonprofit organizations are exempt from certain federal taxes, and then the donors' contributions are also tax deductible. What happens is that to comply though, 501c3 organizations may talk about issues. We can advocate very passionately for our organization's issues, even during an election year. We can engage, we can actually criticize and celebrate sitting elected officials on positions and activities. It does not stop us from doing that. We can conduct nonpartisan public education and training, which we do all the time. And we can do nonpartisan get out the vote and voter registration drives. That's why we can participate and vote forward, for example. But we may not talk about people. We cannot endorse candidates for public office. We can't make any campaign contributions. We can't ask candidates to sign any pledges. So, that's what we say. We focus on policy rather than people. And as I mentioned, even though it seems a little constraining during an election year, I do think it's helped us in the long term. So what does that mean if you end up being an advocate for NCJW? Well, individuals certainly don't give up their basic First Amendment rights of speech and association just because they're involved with NCJW, even if you're in a leadership position. But I do caution you, especially you, Jessica, now that you're actually an employee of NCJW, you have to be very clear when you're speaking as yourself and when you're speaking in your capacity of NCJW. So let's just do a little practice just for fun. Donna, next slide, please. There we go. Keep going. We'll put the whole thing up. All right, I'll let you just read those 2 case studies, and you can let me know which of these badges would you wear to an NCJW board meeting, and what would you wear if you were going to Chelsea's campaign event? Anybody? Jessica, how about you? Because you are probably closest to this issue these days.
Okay, hold on. I'm still reading through it. So.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay. I was trying to listen to everything you had to say first. Now I'm going to read it.
Okay, sorry. I didn't want to put you on the spot. Take a minute.
Okay, so you're asking which of these buttons would be okay to wear actually to either event?
Right. Okay. First, the NCJW board. Yeah. Which of these could you wear to the board meeting?
I think like the NCJW name tag and also the NCJW Women Speak Up. And I think Love Thy Neighbor as well. I don't believe that goes with any political organization or a political party.
Yeah.
And that would probably be it.
Okay, Hannah or Chelsea, do you want to answer the other one? Maybe Chelsea in particular. You're our state rep. You're a state rep hopeful. Which of these badges would you wear to the political campaign?
You would wear the political ones to the political campaign.
Right. But not your NCJW ones. I mean, that one to me, I always think, oh, I'm going to this event. I want people to know about NCJW, but yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's been a big practice piece for me over the last few.
Yeah, you got to have those two very firm 2 hats, right? Yeah. Yeah. Jessica, do you get that? I mean,
yeah,
you could
so
not
you're saying like you're not promoting NCJW at the event. You're just like, you're just yourself.
Yeah, and that will be frustrating for you, right? You've got to be particularly careful. You and I can have more of a conversation about this another time. But yeah, Hannah, does this make sense? You said you've done some other policy work with other organizations. Yeah. Okay, I won't belabor this, but I just, because it is an election year. Sorry.
Just a quick question. I mean, technically, as a volunteer, you can wear like the NCJW Women Speak Up button to a political fundraiser. Like you can, if I have a button on my bag, right, that like I keep on my bag, like that's not, like it might not be the preference, but it's not like legally binding. Like I could wear an NCJW button to, I'm having trouble thinking
Yeah.
of a different example, but there is a difference between like Jessica as an employee of a, of the organization versus like just generic membership. I won't do it. I get that
That's,
it's a cultural
yeah, that's true. And yes, I mean,
part
I
of like the
think,
organizational culture, but I also think it's important, like if somebody messes up and does it by accident, they're not like endangering
right.
exempt status of the entire organization.
Right. Where it does come in though is something like, you're excited about a campaign and you end up working on it, and hey, you use that distribution list like from this evening's event or something like that, right? So yeah. Okay, great. Okay, I won't be, thanks for sharing those and asking those great questions. Donna, if you could go back to that chart from NCJW, sorry, it's out of order. There we go. Okay, so now I do want to talk very specifically about, like we talked about the issues and a little bit about the caveats of how we do things at NCJW, but I want to really get to the heart of how we manage issues at NCJW in Illinois. And in that,
Jill, I just want,
yes.
so you have about 2 minutes, just wanted to let you know, because we're just about at 9:30.
Okay, yeah. So we do that through the NCJW Illinois Policy Committee. We meet monthly via Zoom, where we share information on the issues and progress of legislation and status of our coalitions. We learn from each other, we strategize, and we commiserate. And so Jan and I share this committee. We have representation from both Illinois sections, including the advocacy chairs from both of the sections, our issue leads and general members. So this is just a chart, you don't have to memorize it, but I just did want to show you that we have our issue. For every issue, we have an issue lead, and we actually have identified the coalitions to which we belong. And I want to let you know that a bonus for attending this evening is all the issue leads listed here today have committed to mentoring any one of you here this evening who would like to learn more about any of these issues, shadow them at a coalition meeting, or coach you on your own advocacy. And we'll end up by saying, next slide, or the last slide, Donna, please. I hope you're all ready to get involved. And how do you do that? We honestly have so many different opportunities. Whether you want to just sort of get your toe in the water or up for some laps. And of course, through the magic of Zoom, many of these opportunities can be done kind of from the comfort of your couch. So starting at your bottom left, here are the easy ones. You can start by taking action on Take Action Today, which are alerts that come in your emails on Tuesday. And in there, we've distilled the requests that you get from all those other organizations, and we focus on usually about 3 items of importance or urgency. And we've often provided a really easy link, a petition, make a call, so that you can take action. For slightly more involvement when the state legislator's in session, you become a witness slip warrior. And we mentioned that that's very unique, that's pretty special to Illinois, is we count on witness slips when the committee is meeting on an issue to show grassroots supports. And so if you don't mind, so witness slip warriors respond to an email from me with instructions for directly supporting and once in a while opposing when we have that marriage under 18. A very specific piece of Illinois legislation. So if you don't mind getting a couple of emails from me in the fall, a week from me in the fall and the spring, and can act quickly, please sign up for that. In the middle there, we have, if you want to learn any more about our issues, you can attend one of those spotlight education programs and join that planning team. I would love if you're interested in joining our NCJW policy or SPA team. As I mentioned, we meet monthly via Zoom on the 4th Wednesday evening of the month. If you'd like to even sit in on a meeting once and check it out, let me know. And if you're interested in being paired with any of our issue leads, let Donna know. And for those who are personally invested or just passionate about a specific issue and you want to join us when we meet with our legislators, please let me know about that. During the pandemic, it's been actually easier to get on Zoom than schlepping to Springfield, I have to say. And then of course, for the ultimate advocacy experience, nothing is more empowering than going to Washington NCJW has its Washington Institute this year, May 15th to 17th. And I think Jessica can even let you know that you'll be getting more information and that there are scholarships available for first timers. So from minimal exertion to fully engaged, I hope you'll find a way to get involved that suits you. And you'll find advocating with NCJW is fun and as rewarding as I do. Thanks so much.
Thank you both to Jill and Jan. I just want to, I will send these slides out, but here's their contact information. And like Jill just said, if there's an issue you're passionate about, like she said, it's great that members of our policy committee are happy to mentor you, to, update you, and keep you involved, get you involved in that. So I hope you'll please let us know. And I know it's getting late, but I'm just curious if anything struck you tonight of what we talked about that in terms of like NCJW issues that you want to say, yes, I want to get involved in that, get me involved. And if you feel like this was good background, this is our first time doing this, so let us know if you feel like you learned something. So just quick discussion if we can before we close out and say thank you.
I just thought that this was such an amazing presentation. I mean, it's really, what the work you all are doing is incredible. I wish I had known about this earlier. I think I would have gotten involved earlier. I am interested in one thing you kind of brushed by a little bit about Jewish-Muslim relations. I'd like to understand a little bit about that because, well, one piece of it is because my opponent in the primary, we're not supposed to be talking about politics. She is a Muslim woman, and I'm learning as much as I can, about her culture, just to try and make sure that I'm being, understanding her and being empathetic. So that's something that I like to continue exploring. Also is also climate change. I think that was said by and Jessica.
One thing I might suggest, Chelsea, we can talk more offline, is have you heard of the organization Sisterhood of Salam
That's what I was gonna
Shalom?
say.
No, but that sounds perfect.
Yeah, I would suggest that is their mission, is to put Jewish women and Muslim women together. And they do have
Nothing to do with elections. It's
Yeah,
just
nothing
a
to-
kind of
yeah.
It's been incredible
piece.
partnerships. We also, in
Yeah.
our coalitions, work with Muslim partners, and that's wonderful too, to be working on things together.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, but definitely check out Sisterhood of Salam Shalom,
Yeah,
Chelsea. Maybe even
they're
to start
wonderful.
start a chapter in Palatine. That would be a huge.
they may already be there,
There
actually,
might
Jill.
be. There might
Yeah.
be.
I will look into it. Thank you.
And
Mhm.
I think Beverly's involved. She had to get off, but we can
Yeah.
connect you
She's
to
very
Beverly with
involved
that
with
too.
that. She loves
Yeah.
it.
I will do an email introduction for you
Mhm.
with Beverly. Okay, great. Jessica or Hannah, any thoughts?
Oh, no, I was just gonna say my grandpa was in that kind of a, I guess it would be called a brotherhood instead of a sisterhood in Michigan, like Jewish men and Muslim men. So it might have been like Arabic and Jewish. So
It's very important.
Which
Very
is awesome and
fantastic.
huge population in Michigan.
yes, because
Yes.
Detroit has like the largest like Arabic population outside of the Middle East. So
Yes,
Mhm.
amazing.
I think it's so great that the policy committee leads are offering to help, because I think that's amazing. Like there's so many of you and there's so many issues, and I have to figure out what I really want to, like hone in on. But that's a very generous offer. So please send my thank yous for that.
Well, and we need it. We would, love the involvement of all three of you, and Jessica, we got you. So yeah.
Yes.
How about you, Hannah?
This was really wonderful. I'll be honest, I've been up since 5 because I have a 7-month-old. So I'm past my expiration date for thoughtful process planning, but
Yeah, I'll be in touch with you.
I will,
we'll reconnect
you
during the
guys
day.
have me, you've got my contact info.
Mhm.
You haven't seen the last of me, and thank you all for the conversation tonight.
Yeah. So I want to thank everybody. I know we went a little longer than we wanted, but we hopefully got a lot of information. And so thank you so much. And we will have the recording. I'm going to turn it off in just a brief moment here. But if you have friends who you think might benefit from listening to it, let us know. We can get you the link. Probably get you the link anyway. And please let your friends know about us. And we'd love to have a bigger cadre of younger women. I'm sorry, the other few women didn't come, but they were registered. So thank you all. Thank you for caring about advocacy. And this is how we will all make change together, and have a great night. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank you
all.
so
You were
much.
wonderful.
Thank
It
you,
was
guys.
wonderful meeting you. Bye-bye.